Hello and welcome back to Scout Report. England went into the 2018 World Cup with a young side free from expectation, but an unlikely run to their first semi-final since 1990 has got people thinking that 2020 could be the year to finally end their 54-year hoodoo. Here's 5 ways they could do it. 5. Continue to trust in youth. When Gareth Southgate was appointed England manager in November 2016, English football was at one of its lowest ebbs in a history littered with disappointment. The previous incumbent, Sam Allardyce, had been shown the door after only 67 days after a newspaper investigation revealed he offered advice on how to get around rules on player transfers. Southgate's club managerial career had been underwhelming to say the least. Just over 2 years in charge of Middlesbrough, where he had a 29.8% winning percentage and took them down. But crucially, he had in-depth knowledge of England youth teams, having managed the under-21 side for the previous 3 years. After safely negotiating qualification for Russia, Southgate put this experience into practice, naming a 23 with an average age of 26, the second youngest in the tournament, only narrowly ahead of Nigeria. But with youth comes inexperience, and the general feeling was that their squad, which had an average of 20 caps per player, 14 fewer than the World Cup mean, should aim for the quarter-finals at the most. To put this in context, the last 5 winners of the tournaments before Russia 2018, dating back to Euro 2008, had an average of 38 caps per player, proving that this young side still needs space to develop. But England performed well above expectations, ending their penalty shootout misery against Colombia in the last 16, incidentally their first second-round victory since a 1-0 victory over Ecuador 12 years earlier, before dispatching Sweden to reach their first World Cup semi-final for 28 years. Ultimately, they were outclassed by Croatia in the last 4, but Southgate can take a lot of credit. In the 2 years since his appointment, he has given debuts to 20 different players, including many of the mainstays of their World Cup success: Pickford, Maguire, Trippier and Lingard. And the future looks bright. In 2017, 4 England age groups played across 5 tournaments and the results were spectacular. An 88.2% winning percentage, their only defeats on penalties, and an overall goal difference of +62. This meant that England became the first nation to win 3 youth tournaments in a calendar year. With Mason Mount, Reece Nelson and Jadon Sancho contributing 0.6 goals per game for the respective clubs this season, the production line shows no sign of slowing up as we approach 2020. 4. Put Kyle Walker at right back. On the 23rd of March, Southgate's best-laid defensive plans for Russia were thrown into jeopardy when Joe Gomez picked up an ankle injury against the Dutch. The 21-year-old missed the Champions League final and the World Cup, and Southgate was forced into a defensive reshuffle. 28-year-old Kieran Trippier was now first-choice right wing-back, and he seized the opportunity, playing the tournament of his life, with 1 goal and an assist in 6 games. He scored the fastest World Cup semi-final goal for 60 years, and his deadly set pieces were England's main attacking weapon. Those deliveries meant he clocked up an extraordinary 4 key passes per game, a figure only topped by Neymar and Ozil in the entire tournament. And no one created more than his 24 chances overall. He didn't neglect his defensive duties either, racking up 4.3 tackles and interceptions a game, the most in the 3 Lions squad. So why would we suggest dropping him for Walker, who frequently looked uncomfortable facing balls into the box and eventually lost Perisic for the Croats' equaliser? Well, we are suggesting a change of formation, which we will cover in due course. And in the proposed back 4 system, there is no doubt Walker is the superior player. He marries phenomenal pace with ever-improving decision-making. In fact, only 4 right-backs in Europe managed to top Walker's 6 assists last campaign. And despite playing for a side that averaged 66.4% possession per match in 17-18, nearly 6% more than Spurs, Walker still managed to put in 2.7 tackles and interceptions per 90, compared to Trippier's 2. The most useful metric to compare fullbacks is XG chain, which looks at all passing sequences leading to shots instead of purely expected goals or assists, which tend to benefit more attacking players. This season, Walker's XG chain is ranked 0.49, far superior to Trippier's 0.37. Our suggestion is for Southgate to utilise one of England's only truly world-class players in his preferred position. And hey, if that doesn't work, then they could always try Alexander-Arnold or even Wan-Bissaka. The options are endless. 3. Improve creativity. When people look back at the 2018 World Cup in 20 years' time, they will probably believe that England played vibrant attacking football. After all, they scored 6 past Panama and 12 overall, a tally only bettered by 3 sides. And on an individual level, they excelled. Harry Maguire's 23 touches in the opposition box was more than twice that of any other defender, and Harry Kane's 6 goals saw him bring home the Golden Boot back to these shores for the first time since 1986. But the truth is that 9 of those 12 goals came from set pieces, the most by any team since 1966. The majority of the Leicester defender's touches came with his head, 3 of Kane's goals were penalties, and he only had 1 shot on target in his final 4 games, a penalty against Colombia in the last 16. In fact, in their final 3 knockout games against Colombia, Sweden and Croatia, England only had 6 shots on target. Their tournament average of 3.5 shots on target per 90 was behind the likes of Tunisia, Iceland and Peru. But by utilising their cleverly worked, NBA-inspired set pieces, they dominated the air and managed to score with 10 of their first 13 shots on target. And it's easy to understand why they targeted dead ball situations. Unlike the other semi-finalists who boasted Pogba, Griezmann, De Bruyne, Hazard, Modric and Rakitic within their ranks, Southgate didn't have a world-class creative talent at his disposal. Instead, he packed his defence, utilised the width of his wing-backs, played an unfit Ali and Lingard to provide dynamism in midfield, and left the whole of the creative burden on Raheem Sterling. What would we want to see? Well, England's outstanding creative talents right now are Sterling and Sancho, who are averaging 2.1 key passes per game between them, but both are more natural wide men. Is it time for Southgate to put his faith in James Maddison, England's outstanding creative talent this season with 5 goal involvements in 11 games and 2.4 key passes per 90, the 6th best in the division despite playing for a mid-table side? Quite possibly. 2. Utilise home advantage. Before you all go mental in the comments section, yes, we are aware that the 2020 Euros will be the first continent-wide edition, taking place in 12 cities in 12 different countries across June in just 18 months' time. But both semi-finals and the final are taking place at Wembley in front of 90,000 screaming fans, hoping to see their side finally end one of the longest waits in international sport. And the odds are certainly improved by playing at the home of football, with 9 of the 36 World Cups and European Championships having been won by the host nation. In fact, if you look at the European Championships alone, then 12 of the last 15 hosts have reached at least the semi-finals. If England can once again reignite the passion of '96, then national fervour could sweep the side all the way into a home semi-final. The Three Lions squad of '96 could actually be a useful case study. Here was a squad with an average age of 25 and with an average of just 15 caps per player. Sound familiar? Only Stuart Pearce and David Platt had over 50 caps, and 10 players in their 22-man squad had fewer than 10. But pushed by a tidal wave of national support, they were a penalty shootout away from the final. If England were to make it to the last 4, confidence should be high, with the Three Lions having only lost 2 of their past 17 games at Wembley, dating back to March 2016. If Southgate's men can get past the quarter-finals, it could well and truly be on. 1. Change formation. Our waistcoated wonder did exactly the right thing in Russia. He saw the mistakes of 4 years earlier, in which England's midfield 2 were overexposed, and their centre-backs proved vulnerable as soon as they faced top opposition, and he adapted formation. Add in injuries to Oxlade-Chamberlain and Adam Lallana, the latter who had scored 3 goals in his previous 14 England appearances, and been named England's Player of the Year in 2016, and a change of formation was needed. One of England's key strengths was their fullback depth, and playing 3 centre-backs allowed them to manipulate possession, change angles and cover their deficiencies. But now, having proved they can perform on the world stage, it's time to dominate teams, and they aren't going to be able to do that playing 3-5-1-1. With the players they have available to them, we suggest reverting to a 4-2-3-1 formation, with 4 main personnel changes. The first of which is Joe Gomez coming into central defence alongside John Stones. Although Maguire performed heroically in Russia, 21-year-old Gomez is the coming man of English football. His 2.7 tackles and interceptions per 90 trumps Van Dijk's statistics, and his 62.9 passes per game is the 4th most in a Liverpool squad which dominates the ball, as England hoped to do. Despite the undoubted upturn in form of United's Luke Shaw, our belief is that Southgate should install the less injury-prone Chilwell as his long-term left-back. The 21-year-old, who hasn't missed a single minute of Premier League action so far this season, has created 1.3 chances per 90 this campaign, a figure only topped by left-backs Holebas, Digne and Robertson in the Premier League. Moving into midfield, and there is no doubt that Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain would have started in Russia, had he not ruptured his cruciate ligament during their Champions League semi-final first leg against Roma. He'd had the best season of his career so far, averaging a goal involvement every 0.4 games across 32 games in all competitions. We believe once fit he'll offer a more progressive, dynamic alternative than Eric Dyer, playing alongside Jordan Henderson at the base of midfield. After his superb performances post-World Cup for Russia, in which he has scored twice and assisted once in 3 games, it is difficult to argue Marcus Rashford shouldn't currently start for England, despite immense pressure from Jadon Sancho, who is averaging a goal involvement every 72 minutes this term. So with Rashford and Sterling flanking Kane, the only contentious call is the number 10 position. And despite giving a shout out to James Maddison just a few minutes ago, it has to be Dele Alli. People forget that Ali, who's playing in his 4th year of Premier League football, is still just 22 years old. In fact, he was the 48th youngest player in Russia. His Premier League record is immense, 0.6 goal involvements per 90 over his first 113 games. For context, two of the greatest players of the current Premier League era, Eden Hazard and David Silva, have only averaged 0.5 goal involvements per 90 over their entire stint in England. Utilising the telepathy between Ali and Kane must be Southgate's best bet moving forward. So that was 5 ways that England can win the Euros in 2020. It was actually written by me, so get at me below in the comments section if you've got any suggestions that England can win the Euros in just 18 months' time. While you're here, why don't you go check out yesterday's Stat Wars The League between me and Pato, and don't forget to like and subscribe to all our 3 channels. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.